Good afternoon. Welcome back to Passionate World Radio Network. Distinguish yourself from the ordinary. And today at the International Miami Book Fair, our special guest is NathanHill, who wrote the novel called The Nix. Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for inviting me. Hello, everyone.
So why don't you tell everybody what The Nix is, and then we can proceed from there.
Sure. The Nix is my new novel, and the title comes from a story from Norwegian folklore. A Nix is a spirit of the water that usually is depicted as a kind of like ugly troll type thing, but sometimes it will appear. It's a shapeshifter that will appear sometimes to children as a beautiful white horse, and it'll tempt them to get on, and if they do, it'll gallop them into the water and drown them. It's one of a few Norwegian folk tales about Scandinavian ghosts that I use in the novel, that's where the title comes from. The novel is about it's mostly a mother-son story. It's about a mom who abandons her son when he's 11 years old. She disappears from the family, and then he encounters her again 20 years later, and decides that he needs to try to figure out her whole mystery, her life story, and why she left the family, and what happened before he came along that made her a very kind of distant, very cold, very strange person. So he tries to uncover her whole mystery and finds this epic life story that he never knew about.
So why did you write about something like that? Was something you've known? Is it based on an experience in your family or somebody else's family?
No, I need to be very clear that the mother in The Nix is like I said, very cold, and she abandons the family, and my actual mother is very warm, has never abandoned anything, and very supportive, and she also very much likes the book. So I need to get that out there. You're welcome, Mom.
We know it's your aunt. Come on, admit it.
If there's anything that maybe I used in the book kind of emotionally from my own life to be able to render Samuel and his loneliness after his mom leaves, it might be the fact that my own family, we moved around a lot. We would stay somewhere 2 or 3 years, and then we would move to a new place and move to a new place, and so that feeling of like every 2 to 3 years, like losing all my friends, and suddenly I'm like alone again. Even though I was the one who was leaving, it felt like, to a child, it feels like you've been abandoned. It feels like suddenly you're alone. And so I guess I took a lot of that feeling of losing everybody all at once, and really gave it to Samuel to try to render his feelings of loneliness and abandonment, and the kind of suffering that will happen even into adulthood, if that's the childhood you had.
I think it's good you did it with a boy. So many of these type of stories are done with girls. And while girls are amazing animals, yes, we are human creatures, get that one out, boys are not really perceived as the type of emotional channel in which to funnel through. Boys are strong, they're dependent, they're this and that. And until recently, boys were never allowed to have emotions. Boys were not allowed to cry.
Yeah.
They were not allowed to feel weak. There were so many things you were not allowed. And I think that when you allow boys to be boys and teach them it's okay to cry and it's okay to feel let down, it takes a big burden off of other boys, especially when they can read it in a book. Because when boys read books, they try to identify with the main character. And they want to make sure whether or not they're measuring up to whatever is being written about. After all, that was the attraction of Harry Potter. So when I read your book, The Nix, and I said, oh boy, here's Ben, and Ben's my son, and I told my son, it's okay to cry. If you stub your toe and you hurt yourself, cry, damn it. Don't put it in your stomach like your mommy. You'll have ulcers.
Well, it's a really interesting point. I write that after Faye leaves the family, the thing that connects Samuel and his father is the Chicago Cubs. And that's where they go when when life seems a little too painful or their conversation veers to something a little too personal, they start talking about the Cubs. And it's one of those things, it's a very kind of male way of communicating that, some guys are quite uncomfortable sharing, getting personal, and especially showing weakness. And so you kind of very quickly move to sports or something that's more socially acceptable to talk about. And so but the effect, as you point out, the effect on Samuel of taking all this grief that he has and stuffing it inside him is that it comes out in other ways, which is that he's a crybaby, that he cries a lot, uncontrollably and helplessly, and it's something that causes him a great deal of shame and embarrassment. And so it's probably happening because he has ignored these other feelings for so long, because he denies the sadness that's very present because his mom left. He expresses it in other ways.
And I think it was a good book. I read the book, and I really felt that here was somebody who actually allowed men to be men without giving them any tags, without saying, oh, he's not macho enough or something, because men's behavior is very similar to women's behavior. Oh, they have a few things. I mean, I still struggle with my husband sometimes, but that's another subject. However, when you read books that have boys as protagonists, most of them don't deal with these type of things at all. They come from perfect families, or they just don't, mommy's always some glittering goddess in the sky, and they always have such close, and it's not always like that. I mean, I didn't speak to my mother for years. And it's because you sometimes have problems, and sometimes there's some things that are insurmountable that you cannot get over. I know when my husband finds something that he can't talk about, he compartmentalizes it, and he puts it away somewhere, and he locks it away, and that's it. He doesn't talk about it at all. And you don't do that. And I really applaud you for that, because I think men are looking for permission to be themselves and not to come off of this stoic, upper lip John Wayne type of image, which a lot of kids, a lot of boys in my generation were brought up with.
That's really interesting. Samuel is suffering from that, but also Samuel's dad. We get to meet him when he's a teenager, when he's in high school, falling in love with Samuel's mother, and he has this experience where he's embarrassed on a date, and he can't quite cope with it. He can't quite deal with it. He doesn't have the emotional vocabulary to be able to deal with what's going on inside, and so he does that very kind of male thing. He stuffs his hands in his pockets and kind of pouts a little bit, and whenever she says what's wrong, he can only say nothing, I'm fine. That kind of wall of resistance. But I hope the work of the novel is unpacking all of these characters. I mean, that's sort of my job, right, as the novelist, is that even those guys who are very stonewalled on the outside, of course they have as rich of an inner life as any of us, and so part of my job is to access that inner life, even if they're not expressing it outwardly.
And for us to experience this and to welcome it. I mean, there are a lot of readers who, for example, will take Lord of the Rings or anything else. Then they look at the characters, and even the males are all male, and the women are all women, but there's nothing in between. And you kind of wonder what a really yucky world that is, because there's compassion, but it's not warm. It's there. The characters are there, and they interact with each other, but you really don't feel like it's internal between them.
Yeah.
And when I look at characters, you want to believe that something's going to work out. You want to believe that they're going to work out their differences. And of course his mom does. He says, oh, well, you did act like a jerk, but don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And not everybody can catch that. And I think it's good that it's being expressed and that people are reading about it, because they can say, gee, I can act like a jerk too. I act like that sometimes. And my girlfriend does call me out on it. And I think that's good.
Yeah.
Rather than kings and queens who, beget children and watch them be walled up in a castle for 7 years until a prince comes along. I'm sorry, I have problems with that.
Well, it's a very toxic belief. among men and women that you can't be yourself, or that you can't make mistakes,
Right.
because we make them all the time. And one of the things I'm dealing with in the book is not really knowing yourself, and not like deluding yourself in certain ways, and I think it's really shockingly easy to lose sight of the person that you maybe authentically are, or definitely the life that you want. There's a passage in the prologue of the book where I discuss these. There's this certain. This is going to sound weird. There's this certain like African turtle that swims across the ocean to South America to lay its eggs, and then
Right.
swims back. And the scientists can't figure out why it does this. And the leading theory is that the turtles started doing that eons ago, when South America and Africa were locked together,
Right.
and there might have just been a river separating them, and so the turtles went to the far bank of the river. But then the continents began separating very, very slowly, an inch per year. But after 1,000,000 years or more, the river had become an ocean, but the turtles never noticed. And I
Yes.
love that story because it's a great example of how, in very small ways, bit by bit, in like tiny decisions that we make every day, we lose sight of ourselves, or we lose sight of what we really want. We start making compromises. We start accepting maybe something that we shouldn't. And so I think all of my characters find themselves in that situation. For lack of a better word, they're all stuck in a rut. And how they got there, if they look back, it would be like those turtles, they'd look back and
Yes.
it was just a little bit at a time, but suddenly you're very far away from where you intended to be. So the characters have to kind of work their way out of that rut as the novel goes on.
So tell everybody what you're going to do for the rest of the day at the book fair, whether you have panels, readings, appearances, and then where they can find you on the World Wide Web.
Sure. The book fair, I had a panel earlier today, which was great fun. It was this morning with Amor Tolles and Affinity Konar, who each wrote amazing books called The Gentleman in Moscow and Mischling. Highly recommended. That was a lot of fun. Did some autographs after that. Met a lot of readers, and I think I'm just kind of enjoying myself the rest of the day.
Okay,
Yeah.
where can people find you on the World Wide Web?
They can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/NathanHill author. My website's nathanhill.net, and I'm also on Twitter at NathanReads.
Terrific. And we're going to squeeze the end. You have any plans after this book?
After this book, I'm working on the next book.
Okay.
I've got some exploratory material that's waiting for me. As soon as my book tour is over, I get to get back to it.
Terrific. Well, viewers, listeners, you can hear or see this stream all over again at https://passionateworldradionetwork.com, facebook.com/groups/PWR Talk Network, or facebook.com/PWR Network LLC, or twitter.com/@Cauldwell CAULDWELL. And remember, distinguish yourself from the ordinary. Yeah, you didn't think I could do it, huh?
Yeah.